Story 1, The Shadow in the Basement. When I was 16, my friends and I decided to have a sleepover at my friend Hannah's house. Her parents were out of town, and we thought it would be the perfect opportunity for a night of movies, snacks, and harmless gossip. Hannah's house was old, with a basement that her parents used for storage. It had always given me the creeps, but we didn't plan to go down there, so I didn't think much of it. The evening started off great. We watched a couple of horror movies, had pizza, and talked about school and boys. Around midnight, the power went out. Hannah grabbed some flashlights, and we decided to tell ghost stories to pass the time. The flickering lights and the storm raging outside set the perfect atmosphere for spooky tales. As the night wore on, the stories became scarier. We were all huddled together, trying to scare each other, when we heard a loud thud from the basement. We all froze, staring at each other with wide eyes. "What was that?" asked Sarah, her voice trembling. Hannah tried to laugh it off. "Probably just something fell over. The basement's packed with junk." But another thud followed, louder this time. My heart raced, and I could see the fear in everyone's eyes. We decided to investigate, because, well, that's what you do in these situations, right? Armed with flashlights, we tiptoed to the basement door. Hannah opened it, and we descended the creaky wooden steps. The basement was dark and cold. We shone our flashlights around, illuminating dusty furniture, old boxes, and cobwebs. There was nothing unusual at first, but then we noticed something strange. One of the large storage boxes had been moved from its original spot. It was now in the middle of the room, and next to it was a small, open trapdoor that none of us had ever noticed before. "Did you know about this?" I asked Hannah, my voice barely above a whisper. She shook her head, looking just as surprised as the rest of us. "No. I had no idea that was there." Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to check it out. The trapdoor led to a small, hidden room. It was filled with old, rusted tools, and there was an unsettling feeling about the place. As we explored, the flashlight beams fell upon a dusty, cracked mirror leaning against the wall. It was old, with an ornate frame, and it looked completely out of place. As we stared into the mirror, something terrifying happened. The reflection showed all of us standing there, but there was something else in the background. A shadowy figure, tall and thin, with glowing red eyes, stood just behind us. We spun around, but the room was empty. Fear gripped us, and we scrambled out of the basement, slamming the door shut behind us. We huddled together in the living room, too scared to speak. The power came back on, and the normalcy of the light was somewhat comforting, but the fear lingered. We decided to sleep in the living room, not daring to go back to the basement. Throughout the night, I kept hearing faint whispers and footsteps, but every time I opened my eyes, there was nothing there. It felt like the shadow from the mirror was watching us, waiting. The next morning, we were all exhausted and on edge. Hannah's parents returned, and we told them what had happened. They looked concerned but also a bit skeptical. They checked the basement, but the trapdoor and hidden room were gone. Everything was back in its place. To this day, I have no explanation for what we saw. We never had another sleepover at Hannah's house, and I can't shake the feeling that something dark still lurks in that basement. Story 2, The Mirror in the Attic. It was the summer before we started high school, and my friend Emily invited a few of us over for a sleepover at her family's new house. The place was an old Victorian-style home, full of creaky floorboards and hidden nooks. Emily was excited to show us the attic, which she said was full of old furniture and antiques left by the previous owners. After a day of swimming and barbecue, we decided to explore the attic. It was cramped and dusty, filled with cobwebs and old trunks. We found some interesting things: vintage clothes, old books, and a beautiful but eerie antique mirror. The mirror was tall and ornate, with a gold frame that had intricate carvings of flowers and vines. Despite its age, the glass was perfectly clear. "Let's play a game," Emily suggested, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "How about Bloody Mary?" We all laughed nervously. The idea of summoning a ghost was thrilling and terrifying at the same time. We turned off the attic light, and with only the dim light from our flashlights, we stood in front of the mirror. We chanted "Bloody Mary" 3 times, half expecting something to happen. For a moment, nothing did. Then, the air around us grew cold, and the mirror fogged up. We could barely see our reflections. Suddenly, a shadowy figure appeared in the mirror, its features unclear but definitely there. We screamed and ran out of the attic, slamming the door behind us. Back in Emily's room, we tried to laugh it off. "It was probably just our imagination," I said, though I didn't fully believe it. We spent the rest of the night watching movies and eating popcorn, but the experience in the attic lingered in the back of our minds. As we settled in for the night, Emily suggested we sleep in her room instead of the guest room we had originally planned to use. We agreed, feeling safer together. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to a strange sound. It was a soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone knocking on wood. I sat up, my heart pounding. The sound was coming from the ceiling, directly above us, the attic. I looked over at Emily and the others. They were awake too, eyes wide with fear. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. Emily nodded, her face pale. "It's coming from the attic." Summoning all our courage, we decided to check it out. We grabbed our flashlights and tiptoed up the stairs. The tapping grew louder as we approached the attic door. My hands trembled as I turned the doorknob. The attic was dark and still. We shone our flashlights around, but everything seemed normal. Then, the mirror caught our attention. It was fogged up again, and the shadowy figure was back, clearer this time. It had a gaunt face and hollow eyes, and it seemed to be staring directly at us. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice shaking. The figure's mouth moved, but no sound came out. Suddenly, the mirror cracked, and the figure vanished. The tapping stopped, and the air grew warm again. We bolted out of the attic and back to Emily's room, where we huddled together until morning. The next day, Emily's parents asked why we looked so tired and scared. We told them everything. They decided to check the attic themselves. When they came back down, they had a puzzled look on their faces. "The mirror isn't broken," her dad said. "And there's no figure. Everything looks fine up there." We couldn't believe it. We knew what we had seen. To this day, we have no explanation for what happened that night. We never spoke of it again, and Emily's family eventually moved out of that house. But I'll never forget the haunting figure in the mirror and the cold dread it brought with it.
Story 3: The Haunted Cabin. My best friend, Jake, had a family cabin in the woods that we often used for weekend getaways. It was a rustic place, surrounded by dense forest and far from any neighboring houses. One weekend, Jake invited a group of us for a sleepover. We were all looking forward to a night of hiking, bonfires, and ghost stories. The first evening was perfect. We hiked through the woods, roasted marshmallows over the fire, and shared spooky tales as the night grew darker. Around midnight, we decided to head inside and continue our stories by the fireplace. The cabin was cozy, with a warm glow from the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Jake started telling us about the history of the cabin. Apparently, this place used to belong to a hermit who lived here alone for decades. People in town said he was a bit crazy and that he died here under mysterious circumstances. We all laughed, thinking it was just another one of Jake's made-up stories. But then, strange things started happening. The fire suddenly flickered and dimmed, as if a cold wind had swept through the room. The temperature dropped noticeably, and we all felt a chill. "Did you feel that?" Sarah asked, pulling her blanket tighter around her. "Yeah," Jake replied, looking uneasy. "Maybe it's just a draft." We tried to brush it off, but the atmosphere had changed. The sense of unease grew stronger. Then, we heard it, a faint, whispering voice. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Do you hear that?" I asked, my voice trembling. Everyone nodded, eyes wide with fear. The whispering grew louder, more distinct, but we couldn't make out any words. Suddenly, the door to the cabin creaked open, and a cold gust of wind blew out the fire, plunging us into darkness. Panic set in, and we fumbled for our flashlights. In the weak beams of light, we saw shadows moving around us, but there was no one there. We decided to stick together and investigate. Jake led the way, and we followed closely, shining our flashlights into every corner. As we moved through the cabin, the whispering grew louder, almost as if it was right next to us. We reached the door that led to the basement. None of us had ever been down there before, and we weren't eager to start now. But the whispers seemed to be coming from below, drawing us in. Jake hesitated, then opened the door. The basement stairs creaked under our weight as we descended. The air was musty and cold. Our flashlights revealed old, decaying furniture and cobweb-covered boxes. The whispers were louder now, almost deafening. At the far end of the basement, we saw a small, wooden chest. It was old and covered in dust. Jake approached it cautiously, and with a deep breath, he opened it. Inside, there were old photographs, letters, and a worn-out journal. The journal belonged to the hermit who had lived there. We gathered around as Jake read aloud. The journal entries were disturbing. They spoke of isolation, madness, and an unseen presence that tormented the hermit until his death. The last entry was particularly chilling. "The whispers won't stop. They come from the shadows. They want me to join them." Suddenly, the basement door slammed shut, and the whispers turned into agonized screams. We bolted up the stairs, desperately trying to open the door. It felt like an eternity, but we finally managed to burst through and escape the basement. We ran out of the cabin and into the safety of the woods. We spent the rest of the night huddled around the dying embers of our bonfire, too scared to go back inside. When morning finally came, we packed up and left, swearing never to return to that cabin. Jake's family eventually sold the cabin, but we never spoke of that night again. The experience left us shaken, and the memory of the whispers and the hermit's journal still haunts me to this day.